Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight, we're continuing our journey and covering the Analects. We'll be covering book 6, chapters 14, 15, and 16. Those will be the first three chapters that we'll be covering. Penny, would you do the honors and read chapters 14, 15, and 16 for us?
Okay. Book 6, chapter 14. See you, being governor of Wu Chang, the master said to him, "Have you got good men there?" He answered, "There is Tan Tai Min Ming, who never in walking takes a shortcut and never comes to my office excepting on public business." Chapter 15. The master said, "Mang Chi Fan does not boast of his merit. Being in the rear on an occasion of flight, when they were about to enter the gate, he whipped up his horse, saying, 'It is not that I dare to be last. My horse would not advance.'" Chapter 16. The master said, "Without the specious speech of the litanious toe and the beauty of the Prince Chao of Sung, it is difficult to escape in the present age."
Thank you, Penny. Would anybody else like to read their version of?
I have the email.
Okay, please, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. 14. See, you being governor of Wu Chang, the master said to him, "Have you got good men there?" He answered, "There is Dan Tai Mi Ming, who never in walking takes a shortcut, and in accepting on public business never comes to my office." 15. The master said, "Mi Jian Fan does not boast of his merit. Being in the rear on an occasion of flight, when they were about to enter the gate, he whipped up his horse, saying, 'It is not that I dare to be last. My horse would not advance.'" 16. The master said, "Without the specious speech of the litanist, toe, and the beauty of the Prince Zhao of Song, it is difficult to escape in the present age."
Thank you, James. And I apologize to everyone for that interruption. I just should have trusted my instincts. With that, why don't you go ahead and share, Jason?
Yeah. Okay. Just 1 minute. Okay. 16. 14. Ziyu was the governor of the city of Wu. The master said, "Have you been able to employ any good people?" Ziyu said, "I have found Dan Tai Mian Min, who never takes shortcuts in his work and does not come to my home unless he has real business to discuss." So Ziyu, I think we're all familiar with him. He has been a very young disciple and show up many times. He became a governor or a magistrate of a small city, Wucheng. The person's name, Dan Tai Mian Min. Okay, that Dan Tai Mian Min, that's a strange name. Sounds like Japanese name. But historically, this person is ugly. So there's a saying that you don't judge people by his look. So why special talk about the Dan Tai Mian Min? Because he looks ugly. And the Ziyu's judgment is he's a good person. He never takes shortcut, and then only come to my home for the real business. So the point here is the word "jing." Okay, I think most of the translate as a shortcut, but technically means a small road It's an opposite to Dao, which is big way. Okay, so usually a 君子 have to walk on the straight, big road, which is Dao, and not take the shortcut, which is called Jing, is small road. I think in chapter 19, in this book, Confucius will talk again, same thing about straight and the crook. Straight is Dao, and the crook is Jing, which is shortcut. So I think that's the metaphor. Yeah. 15. Okay. The master said, Meng Zi Fan. Okay. Remember when we talk about Meng. Okay, that's from the Meng family. Okay. So when I just cannot. I just have to admit Confucius is quite political when he deals with state rules, politics. Whenever he talk about people of Meng, okay, that's a good word. And talk about Ji family, usually is not a good word. So remember, that's the Meng family. The master said, Meng Zifan was not boastful. Once he was covering the rear in a flight. Before entering the gate, he whipped his horse and said, no lack of bravery kept me behind. My horse won't go. Okay, so he doesn't want to show off. And this one is a historical account. I find out it's on Confucius' later time, after Confucius traveled around the world and come back, kind of retired. He was 67 years old, and that's a war from state of Lu and the northern neighbor, state of Qi. Okay, so the state of Lu was defeated, and the Confucius student Ran Qiu, okay, and Fan Shi, okay, they're all in this battle. 16. The master said, without the eloquence of preacher Tuo and the handsomeness of Prince Cao of Song, it is difficult to stay out of trouble in the present time. So there's a two person talking about, one called Zhu Tuo. Okay, that my translation I should be talking about preacher Tuo. His name is Tuo, and his job is probably like a toastmaster, okay, in the ceremony. Okay, so he is beautiful, can speak eloquently. Okay, so good words. Another one is the handsome man. Okay, the Prince Cao in the state of Song. Later on in the, I think it's in chapter 28, he's related with an extramarriage affair with another a duchess. Okay, so remember that person is handsome, and then another person has like a sophist. So I don't know how you read this one, and I find out the language is difficult because in Chinese, Confucius said without, okay, the eloquence of preacher Tao and the handsomeness of Prince Zhao, it is difficult to stay out of trouble. Okay, so that means in today's life, you need to have can speak beautifully and looks very handsome to survive. I think that's what Confucius said. And then, of course, he's a little bit satire. He talked about that's too bad. That's what he meant. So, so many negative. So I find out, the translation is difficult in this chapter. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. Aman, would you like to go?
Yes. I really appreciated Jason's translation of verse 16, because he's right. It is one of the ones I've seen challenge translators the most, where their interpretations of what's being said sometimes strain the actual Chinese that's there. And I think his captures both the multiple negativity in the original Chinese, but also the heart of the message, which is a morality lesson. And book 6 really is sort of verses on virtues. Again and again and again, we're reading about somebody who's qualified for something or somebody who's not qualified for something, or do these virtues make this person qualify as ren in a specific case. And in these 3 little verses, we get a nice snippet of sort of that virtue teaching in actual worldly action. So he's asking a former student, have you found anybody who's any good? And instead of simply saying yes, he gives him the person and the qualities that give this person merit. And when he's talking about Mang Jifang, he's not talking about what Mang Jifang said or what others thought of him. He's giving an example of one of his own statements as evidence that this was a brave man, and it wasn't, you know, anything that did not speak to his bravery was not because of his own accord or because of misrepresentation. It's because circumstances may not have allowed him to move forward when he wanted to go forward, which is probably a thinly veiled allegory to Confucius's own life as well. And the idea that one needs the eloquence of Preacher Tao and the handsomeness of Prince Zhao to be taken at all seriously, or to be looked at in the current circumstances, is both an indictment of the world in which he lived in at the time, but also saying, but there's obviously some merit to having some eloquence and to being comely and attractive to people. I don't think he'd want any of his students to ever sacrifice the real virtues that he espoused, Shao, Ren, you know, bravery. But yeah, these eloquence, you know, handsomeness, those have some merits as well. They'll get you through a door. They'll get somebody to look at you. So yeah, I think these are nice little encapsulations of the broader spectrum of what Confucius has been talking about in book 6, which is what makes for a meritorious person, what makes them a better person, what makes for a worse person. And so far, Yinwei has been held up as the best example that you have in the entirety of that book, but he's not the alpha and omega. He's not the beginning and the end of virtues. There are other virtues to have, and they too have some merits.
Thank you very much, Aman. One of the things that Jason, that you had mentioned was this, for at least number 14, was this idea of taking shortcuts. And I had read a little bit about that, and that is a little bit more meaningful than just the idea of taking a shortcut. So there's multiple translations that I've read, and one of them had byway in there, and specifically byways are straight and narrow, and so those in humble positions had to walk in order to travel were allowed to take byways, essentially. Would you like to comment any more on that, this idea? I mean, there's something more to that?
Yeah, because that's the road, right? Basically, actually, the actual words in this chapter, Confucius use 2 words. Use the word called jing. Okay, jing means a small road. Okay, so he talked about let me see the exact word. He said, 行不由径. Okay, he never walked the small road.
Right.
Okay? So here, the small road, the metaphor of the small road means, I think shortcut means that's the correct meaning. But usually the small road is meandering, right? It's not shortcut. It's difficult. But here means or another way to talk about is a small road, which is not the right, correct road. Okay, so he probably, so for example, we can think about the situation, right? So I want to send a gift as a bribery to my boss, right? I don't walk on the big road. I walk on a small road because I don't want people see me in the evening walking over there. So that's another way to look at a small road. So actually, if you want to translate word by word, shortcut is not right. You should call it small meandering road, something like this. So that's actually the literal meaning.
Okay, thank you. Anybody go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat for, oh, James, you had already done that. So I didn't mean to go ahead of you there, but we can come back to a couple of other questions that I have. But I think most, yeah, we'll first James, then Quan.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to comment on these because I think they're interesting.
Yeah.
14 is, though it's virtue, I think it's a commendation. I see it as a commendation. So he's asking, is there a commendation for Dantai Mineng? And essentially, to me, it means that he's dutiful. That doesn't take shortcuts. Means he's dutiful, and he doesn't waste the time of others. It's just I think the saying that he doesn't come to my office unless he has business or something like that. That's a little too neutral. It is kind of a virtue to that he's trying to put him in a positive light. Doesn't waste the time of others. And then for Ming Jifan in 15, this is a strange one because it looks like he might be saving face or making excuses, but there's this idea that he's bringing up the rear. So like when I was young, people would often say if you were a little late or you were the one that was coming last because you were talking to someone not in the group, you would be, they would say, oh, here comes Jim bringing up the rear. So, and that was kind of like a cut, people kind of like looking down on you for being last. And here he says, well, I've got a horse problem here. Otherwise, there's no issue with my courage and will, in this situation. And I'd be interested in hearing other people's opinions on that.
Yeah, can I ask a quick question, maybe a point of clarification? Coming up the rear may have meant something different in this particular instance because they were retreating, from what I understand. So they would have been protecting the rear for the rest of the people that were actually trying to get away. If that's something that
true, but that doesn't
in this particular.
But that doesn't mean that he didn't say that he had a horse problem.
Okay.
So in other words, the fact that he made an excuse could be contrived to be saving face. So why is his expression that it's the horse's fault? That otherwise would have been a little bit sooner. And then the 16 is kind of historical to me. I mean, you could look at it as a really bad time, and there's problems. There's a war going on, and he's talking about that. But this is any time. We have times in societies that are good, really good, and then times in societies that are fairly bad. And it reminds me of something that my father-in-law said to me when I visited Chile for the first time. He said, you speak Spanish well enough so that no one is going to hang you if you ever get into trouble. So I thought, and he said it in Spanish, no van a colgarlo. So it's kind of.
Is this under Pinochet, I'm assuming?
It was after Pinochet. No, it was after. It was a year or two after. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually, my father-in-law had been a kind of like a Pinochet supporter, and he had a lot of kids, and all the kids were against Pinochet. So yeah, it was a difficult time in a society, and that kind of expression comes from times like those. So that you can't talk, the idea that you can't, unless you talk really well like this guy, or you're really handsome like that guy, might have some problems these days. Yeah, that kind of makes a little bit of sense. Sometimes things do get bad, and you need at least to be able to defend yourself or to look good in circumstances. So that it could be taken in that general sense, either speak very well or make sure you look good, and then you'll survive these trying times. So I take a lot of these sayings as general lessons. I like hearing the specific references to the personalities and the history of ancient China, but at the same time, it's rewarding, I think, to understand them as general lessons, like make sure that you're able to, if they want to hang you, make sure you can talk your way out of it, or at least you look good, right? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to come back to some of what you said, but Quan.
Yeah, so I want to start with Prince Zhao of Song. And that one is a famous character because he was the brother or the cousin, a close cousin of the princess of Song, who married the Duke Wei, Ling of Wei. And that Duke Ling of Wei was an old man. And the two, the Princess Nanzi and the Prince Zhao of Song, had an affair openly under the eyes of the old Duke, who was an understanding man and did not interfere too much in their affairs. And so what is interesting in that paragraph, beyond the historical facts, is that it's one of my favorite paragraphs, because it's demonstrate or it shows that Confucianism can be very down to earth or very sublime, okay? And the down to earth and the sublime dimensions are together. I don't remember where exactly, but in one of the paragraphs of the Analects, Confucius wrote or said that the gentleman loves beauty and good food, but he will, and wealth and power, but he will not get wealth, power, beauty, and good food by inappropriate in an inappropriate manner. So here he also stressed the fact that if you can talk with eloquence, or if you have a good appearance, it's absolutely not a problem, okay? Because those are tools that nature gave you, and you can use those tools in a good way or in a bad way. So there's nothing wrong to be handsome or to talk with ease. And that's the mix of very down-to-earth dimension of Confucianism with the more sublime dimension of Confucianism. And we have plenty of these things in the Analects. And I think that's what one of the dimensions that make Confucianism a very practical philosophy, and not only theoretical considerations.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, so that's an important point that you're making here. So would life be difficult if you didn't have any of these attributes, essentially? I mean,
yes.
Is that because, so that's, and it's an important question, because it means that that your happiness isn't necessarily just obtained through virtue. It
Absolutely.
means that it also requires a certain level of status, and that's just a slightly different approach than some other virtue ethics, where you can pursue virtue, and no matter what the conditions that you are in, you will have a certain degree of satisfaction. Whereas this is saying you have to be able to at least look good or speak well. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time. and not totally dissimilar to some of Aristotle's beliefs of you need externals to some degree.
Absolutely,
Okay.
because let's not forget that Confucianism started as a school for young noblemen, and those young noblemen needed to learn some basics. For example, how to act with good manners at court, how to pronounce rightly certain words, how to know to quote certain classical poems in certain circumstances. So for Confucianism, there can be no happiness outside the society, outside the family, outside the state, okay? Confucianism is not a doctrine or theory for someone wishing to go to the mountain, for example, or to the caves. I remember a monk reacting last week or the week before when someone make a match or rapprochement between Buddhism and Confucianism. And I remember Amon say, "Oh no, it's a disaster. You cannot make that kind of rapprochement," and citing Han Yu, I think, a Confucianist of the 8th century. And Amon is perfectly right, okay? Because Confucianism is fire and Buddhism is water. At the core, those two philosophies cannot be together. Even if at the sublime dimension, you can find some rapprochement, of course, but that is at the highest dimension. It's not for the average Confucianist or the average Buddhist.
Okay. Aman, you have some comments on this?
Oh no, I did not want to skip the line. I just
what?
my thoughts are
Okay.
I think we got Jason and Kevin.
Kevin, yeah, Jason. Oh, I didn't see Jason.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have skipped you, Jason. I'm sorry.
no, that's fine. Yeah,
Nor you,
kind of
Kevin.
like to re-emphasize on the. Let me share the screen here on the sorry, on the 15, right? It's a no doubt about it. Kind of respond to what James talked about. He used the word "fa" means boaster. Okay, he break it. Okay, for no doubt. And when he wrong. Okay, and he used the word "ben." Okay, this word Chinese sometimes, ancient Chinese sometimes very ambiguous. Okay, but in these few words are very clear. This meaning wronging, but this when you are defeated, you use this word. Okay, you are not going to when you are winning, you don't use this word. That's the word when you run away. Okay, so very sure, Meng Zifan is in the situation, got defeated, and the people praise him, say, "You are so brave. You are the last one. Enter the gate." Okay, so he said, "Oh no, because my horse is not going to run. So I whip my horse, and he still doesn't want to run." So kind of in the Confucius considers a virtue, very humble, never. And when he praised his best student Yan Hui, okay, he talk about Wu Fa San. He never boast his goodness. Okay, so never boast is very important for the Confucius.
Yeah. And if I may add, it's very Asian, okay, in the sense that he was being modest, okay. I don't remember in what Japanese movie, but there is a scene similar to that. A guy wanted to give money to a beggar, but he would say to a beggar, "I just want that money from the casino. So you accept that money? It will improve my karma, okay? Because I just gamble in the casino." So he was playing the modest person.
Mm. So it was virtuous.
Yes, not boastful, modest.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you. Next up, we have Kevin, then Aman.
Yeah, thank you. I want to comment 6:14. It's the investor we go in the conflict of interest. When you are officer, conflict of interest.
Which number?
6:14. 614, which made about the gentleman, right?
Yes,
They
yes.
use a big load, not a small load, and also even like not going to their try not go their business other than business, not discuss their friends, or this case is is another officer. You think about Western, we use conflict of interest. If you on a power, so your family, your friend, either it is right, barber you or visit you. So they also another idiom we in China opposite way would be 一能得到鸡犬升天 that's which means if you one person is have power in your family, your whole family and heritage get benefited. So this is another way about virtual way. Think about this. You keep your responsibility. It's not just your virtue. It should we take care of yourself, clean, and as officer. And the 615 for me, my take is, this is like concept a little bit Asia kind of mild think. If you people praise you, you humble enough, not thank you so much. I'm not as Asia way would be say, thank you so. In my heart maybe take it, but I still think I would say consider think others. How about people don't value myself and devalue other folks? So, and what's the 16? Yeah, this is for me. I take this one. It would be this is reality, generation by generation. Even Confucius time of previous. Basically, it's word, language, and your appearance matters, right? So if I can speak native language, would be different taste for the local. And if I'm beauty, of course, I could be a movie star, or you get more opportunity for job market. So sometimes Confucius, I understand, he complained at the time over there. However, it's happened today. Thank you.
Aman. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, there were two things that actually stood out to me as I was listening to the discussion. And I think I'll take the latter one first because it feels like the light lift. When Quan, I believe you said, or Jason, or when it was said that this is a very Asian thing, I think that's cart before horse. It's a very Confucian thing, and Confucianism is ubiquitous to Asian culture. It begins really here with his teachings, but it seeps its way so deeply ingrained throughout the culture that it feels universal and as if it were just something that happens on that side of the Ural Mountains, when in fact it really was the dissemination of Confucian thought that spread throughout East Asia, through China, Korea, Japan, Vietnam, Indonesia. It was a monumental paradigm shift in that part of the world that has continued to have repercussions all the way through today, to where it does feel as if it's just, that's just the Asian way to be. Yes, because it has its roots with what Confucians said, over 2,500 years ago. So that was one thing, to sort of inverse those perspectives. It's not indicative to being Asian that humility and self-deprecating sort of views come. Those are spawned in Confucianism, and they spread through Asian culture as a whole. The second thing I was thinking about was, as there was discussion about this idea of the virtue ethic that's being taught here, and this sort of attempt to compare it or parallel it to Western virtue ethics. The big difference would be, in my opinion, that you can talk about Western virtue ethics and you could draw it in Chinese language with that same character for person and the number 1. It can be something that can be done alone. As Quan said, this is not an ethic that exists outside of other people. You can't go be a Confucian hermit. You must be engaged with others. That's why that character for Ren is a person and the number 2. That is fundamental to his teaching, that all of these things exist contextually within a society with interaction with others. There's a section in book 8 where he starts to sort of lay out some of these cardinal virtues, things like reverence, patience, courage, straightforwardness, but then says the downside to having them without ritual constraint, li, which is the convention of the society that is placed around you enacting these ideas. And the way I can sort of put this much more pragmatically is that it's one thing to be authentic and spontaneous and joyous at seeing someone and running up and hugging them. That might be appropriate in most contexts, but it would probably be inappropriate in others. And as much as it may be my spontaneous desire, excuse me, to scoop up a student I haven't seen in 10 years in front of my class and say, oh, look at this. This is such a great example of, what it can happen when you really apply I'm so proud of it, and just embarrass them and dote on them and gush on them. It would be inappropriate and unhelpful in a couple of ways. 1, it would embarrass the hell out of them. 2, it would make me look like a gushing fool. And 3, it would create an unrealistic sort of expectation that we can get that reaction out of professor if we try hard enough. And maybe I just don't like that student. So it's better to stay ritually appropriate to circumstance with the person under the circumstance in Confucius terms. And so this idea of virtue existing like courage or bravery or straightforwardness in and of itself, and being a good in and of itself, is something missing from Confucianism, where he says, this is not a good in and of itself. It is only good as it is good for those around you as well.
That's very, very important. And I also get a feeling like that there's these rituals are almost a form of ensuring temperance to a certain degree.
Show of respect for the social contract. The rituals arise out of a society, out of a culture.
Right.
And so by participating with them, you are showing respect for that entire society, that entire culture that birthed them. And you try to keep that in mind as you enact those rituals, while still expressing your authentic self without being slavish to just following the ritual. And that example I gave of a classroom, it's appropriate to greet a long-lost student who returns. Confucius would probably applaud that. It is appropriate to smile and sing their praises, but in that tempered manner that is appropriate to that venue, in consideration of everyone in that venue, not just for your position there as head of class and them as former student and these other people as current student, but to be thinking of everybody and how your reaction, your response, your behavior will have repercussions going forward, and not just emote yourself because it's authentically you.
Thank you for that. Are there any other comments regarding these 3 passages? I know that Jason may have to leave a little earlier this evening, and I want to make sure I at least get his second set. Penny, feel free to go ahead, or Brian.
Yeah, this is just a quick one.
Please.
On the 15 and about the person not being boastful. And this picture is great because he's actually being courageous, defending the people, being at the rear. And then when they almost have reached safety, this is what I'd say, you know, they go through the gates,
Right.
and he spurs his horse on and he goes ahead, but he says, oh, well, I wasn't really being brave, but my horse wouldn't go. But everybody could see the horse would go once he spurred it on. So
Right.
I thought that was, you know, kind of a play there with, he says, well, I wasn't being really brave, but, you know, he was. And it looked like it might be obvious to most people who were there and saw it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that 100%. That was my takeaway. That was my takeaway. If there are, let me see, actually, I see somebody else that had put something in the chat. Okay. Well, I want to get to Jason's translations for, I guess it would be for 17, 18, and 19. Because those are actually, I think, going to be very difficult to cover, at least when I was reading them. Maybe you guys can simplify it for me. I'd really like to see the translation. So if we could go ahead and just get started with that. I know it's 9:53. Penny, could you read your version, and then followed by James?
Sure. 17. The master said, who can go out except through the door? Why then does no one follow this Tao? Chapter 18. When plain substance prevails over patterned refinement, you have a bumpkin. When patterned refinement prevails over substance, you have a clerk. When substance and pattern are in balance, only then do you have a junsi. 19. Men stay alive through straightforward conduct. When the crooked stay alive, it is simply a matter of escaping through luck.
Thank you, Penny. James. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
So sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay. 17, the master said, who can go out but by the door? How is it that men will not walk according to these ways? 18, the master said, where the solid qualities are in excess of accomplishments, we have rusticity. Where the accomplishments are in excess of the solid qualities, we have the manners of a clerk. When the accomplishments and solid qualities are equally blended, we then have the man of virtue. Number 19, the master said, man is born for uprightness. If a man lose his uprightness and yet live, his escape from death is the effect of mere good fortune.
Thank you, James. Jason.
Okay, so we start from 17, right?
17, that's correct.
Okay.
17, 18.
Okay, these three are very short, and I think they're simple, except 16. Okay, I will let Armand take care of that. So 17. Okay, the master said, who can go out without using the door? So why doesn't anybody follow the Tao, which is the way through the door? So basically, it's a good metaphor, right? Just like in Bible, Jesus said, "I'm the way," right? So that's universal. We talk about way as the right way. So he talk about everybody have to go out from the door. So and then they have the road. So why don't follow the road, the way, the Tao? So that's he's talking about. I'm going to skip 18 and go straight to 19. The master said, people should live straightforwardly. Those who live crookedly may only escape through luck. So basically here they use the two words 直 and 王. Okay, 直 means straightforward, straight. Okay, so which is Dao. Okay, Wang literally means the crooked. Okay, not the straight. So basically, he is talking about we should go straight, which is Dao, not crooked way, which is weird, not writing. Okay, so if you may argue against Confucius, oh, you see, Joe did it, and it worked. They say no, that's just luck. Okay, so that's because it goes through the wrong way and you can get through. That's just pure luck. 18. Okay, so it's a little bit difficult, I believe.
Yeah.
The master said, because the master said, when true self surpass arrogance, that's the words I use. Okay, true self surpasses arrogance, one will be rustic. When arrogance surpasses true self, one will be a clerk. Okay, I put the blue here because among suggests literary or whatever. Okay, and hypocrisy. And I'll let him explain that. Okay, after true self and arrogance are well balanced, one can be a Junzi. Okay, so Wen Zhi Bin Bin Amang highlights this one. That I will let Amang explain. And then I think the difficult part is Zhi and Wen. Okay. Zhi, and I think it's one translation called the substance, and one calls the pattern. Okay, but I think it doesn't matter how you translate. I think the first word means your nature, your true self, your essence, and one means your education, your outside, your surface. So here he's talking about if your true nature, your inborn nature, your heart overcome, okay, surpasses your education, you will become rustic, okay, and too rude, right? And then if your culture, if the education is cover up your innate or your instinct or your true nature, you will become, they use the word 史, okay, means historian. But there's different opinion. Among will suggest would be the literary, and I think that's the same words as Li, which means clerk. Okay, that means you are a skillful person, but it's a vessel. Okay, not a Junzi. So that's the two things Confucius want to balance. So the Zhi, another way you can interpret as Lao Tzu, Dao De Jing, talk about the uncarved block, Pu, okay, that means the true nature. So in Confucius' point of view, you need to keep your true heart and also need some education, the outside. And then you should be well balanced. Then you become a Junzi. You cannot be like totally superficial. Okay, you also cannot be like Taoism. You only show your nature. I think that's the essence. But how to translate? That's a challenge. I have no idea how can find a good word for that.
Yeah, I mean, not to jump on Alman's. May I comment really quickly? Yeah, in your translation I looked at several translations for this, and I just lost the number that you were on. 18. The true self surpasses elegance, and you were talking about how that is our nature, correct? But
that's one is 直 means yourself in it, okay, or you want to call essence, or
yeah,
you want
ZHI you're talking about. So if that is our true nature, then that wouldn't that be virtue?
I don't think so. He's talking about your inborn, innate, or yourself, so-called self. Okay, yourself, the self, right? Because among us, among Jason is Jason, Joe is Joe. We are different. Even both three of us are all very, very virtuous person. Okay, but we all different. That's ourselves, right? And they have something education. Okay, we learn, we do with something, right? So you cannot have your education of outside cover up yourself. So Jason and Amang and Joe all looks the same. Okay, so I think that's what Confucius is talking about. Okay, because even I'm the bad person, I have my own nature, right? And then your education or something outside, you can cover it up. So Confucius is talking about 文质彬彬, that means your 文, which means you can call pattern, you can call education, you can say your culture. 质 means your essence, your innate, okay, your true self. Jason is Jason, among us among, and they show well balance, and then you become a gent. Okay, you are not just learn the outside, then you become a clerk. You only a vessel. So,
So when you say when,
okay, there's
when,
two words.
W-E-N, right?
W-E-N, right? There's the two words, right? One is one.
Yeah, and that's like refined expressions.
Yeah, you can say, you can put these two words, right? One is nature, one is culture, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So you can look at it like roughly. Okay, it's definitely arguable, but we can roughly put one is nature, one is so if this one over that one, you become too rustic. If this one over that one, you become too, let's say, superficial. Okay, so you have to balance. Then you become. Yeah, that's another way to look at it. And what's the right word to use? I hope somebody can send email to me and give me a suggestion, because I really don't know what's the right word to use. So.
I mean, I think you use the right word with natural. So I mean, I'm not going to criticize. I have no idea what I'm talking about. So here, let's just go with the model.
Okay. Anyway, I have to go, and then I see you guys next week. Yeah.
Leave us with the hardest one and leave. Okay.
Yeah, because I get to Amang. You know, we have kind of not so agree on this one, and then I just leave. Then Amang take.
I put a note for you in the chat. Authenticity for the true self, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, I think that authenticity probably that's another good word to use, right? Thank you, James.
I got to hear this, because this is actually, and it's critical too.
Sorry, I have to go.
Yeah.
Have a great vacation, Jason.
Yeah, take care.
Not vacation.
Take care, Jason.
Oh, okay. Work hard.
Yeah, work hard.
I did.
Oh.
Yeah, I will not.
Bring it home for us.
Oh boy, deep into the weeds. Well, I'll do the short ones first and then come back on 18, just because 17, this seems like, to my way of thinking, one of the few times you hear the master talking about follow the path in those kind of very specific Taoist evocative language. It does feel to me like this may be something thrown in centuries later as a slap towards a budding form of Taoism. You can only, follow a path if you go through a door, but nobody's going through the door that this master has shown them. They're all just out there wandering in the field, lost every which way. It does feel a little post hoc to my way of thinking, but it is interesting because it could also be construed as sort of an inspiration point for some people who thought, well, Confucius said that the most important thing in this verse was for people to follow the way. He talks about who can go out without using the door, but obviously you could have more than one door to go through. So I could see where a whole argument could spin out from that. Anyway, feels very post hoc to me, but I think it's pretty straightforward propaganda. The master said people should live straightforwardly. Those who live crookedly may only escape through luck. And this too is kind of a do it the right way, or the only way you're surviving is, the Lord taking care of babes and fools. Chapter or verse 18. This is interesting because this kind of picks at a very fundamental concept. I don't want to speak of this strictly from sort of a Taoist reactionary perspective, but this idea of true self or zhiren, the thing in and of itself, the natural thing, is evoked in this chapter. And it's saying that if that surpasses eloquence or elegance, refinement, culture, shaping by your society, then all you have is a rustic bumpkin. You may be purely authentic and unfit for any sort of polite society. On the other hand, if eloquence and elegance and that refinement smothers that true self, well, then all you have is a functionary. And he used the term clerk because it is a fairly common way of translating the idea of shirt. I like translating that better as a literati, or even, just being bold with it and saying a hypocrite, because that's kind of what he was getting at. Someone who apes the trappings of society, but really on the inside has no character, no refinement, they're never going to be functional for anything other than some pencil pushing and number crunching. Because as soon as you give them any sort of responsibility over another, any real responsibility other than tallying columns, you're going to see that true character come out, and it'll be disastrous because it hasn't had any refinement of its own. That true character has had no refinement, just the refinement of society surrounding it. A true self and elegance in balance. That is what it takes to be a junzi. So here you get the first time formula for manufacturing a junzi. You don't get told all the nitty gritty of it, but you are told that it's a balance. It's a balancing act between who you authentically are, and I like James's choice of using the term authentic, versus who you're acculturated to be. And when you get that perfect balance, you actually get a junzi. And he's not saying that one is better than the other on its own. Either one, without the balance of the other, results in disaster. Without getting into sort of the etymological nitty-gritty and weeds of why we're arguing over exactly how to translate that word, sure, I think clerk is a perfectly acceptable, fine, and common way of translating it. But I do think some of those other options can evoke a little bit more of what he means when he says that somebody could only be that if they have only elegance and no true self, or no refinement to their true self, one might say.
Yeah, this is actually, we can really go deep with this. And I'm not sure how deep we want to go.
It's
this.
The rest of the analects that's going deep into this.
Yeah. It really is.
This is the formula right here. And so all the rest of it, details.
Yeah, anyway, I'll hear from Quan, because this is a very important point, the balancing the scribe, your position with your morality in order to actually achieve some level of balance. And I do have questions about great scribes versus lesser scribes, maybe as well. Maybe we can get into that, as far as there's something called the Rights of Zao. I don't know if Quan, maybe you can help with that.
I would like maybe to suggest, because from a strictly semantical point of view, Shu is rightly translated as clerk or literati. Okay, so the question is not there. I think the question is truly to understand the text. And I like very much the choice of hypocrite, okay, because maybe there's an English word which is prig, P-R-I-G, okay? A prig is someone self-righteous and acting as if superior to others. But I would like to free myself from the word and the character. I would like to propose a translation not having to do anything with the characters, but with the idea. So
Okay.
when he say, here is the dance between the personality and the individuality, okay? The personality at the mass, as the word persona in Latin, coming from Greek originally, and those persona were the mask that the Greek and the Latin actors were wearing to amplify their voices in ancient times. So nowadays we have the psychodynamic idea of personality, and those personalities are memories who were given to us by people who influenced us when we were younger or we were under their authority. So those masks, we all have a collection of masks because we met people who were important for us when we were a child, a teenager, a young man, etc. And that collection of masks, from that collection of masks, will appear an individuality, okay? Meaning who you are authentically. And it's okay to have the collection of masks, okay? Because let's not forget that for Confucianism, as Aman stressed very rightly, you have to learn what is the correct behavior in certain social settings with a certain number of persons, okay? So you need that collection of masks to be appropriate in social circumstances inside the society, but at the same time, you need to evolve personally at a high enough level to know who you really are, okay? Your individuality. So it's if I want to use the vocabulary of Gustav Jung, it's the integration process, okay? So that integration is to make the phoenix of your individuality appear from the ashes of your personality. But it's not because from the ashes of your personality in the sense that you are no longer controlled by those voices, but you can use those masks when it's needed, but being fully aware that you are using the mask and that the masks are not using you.
And that would be the danger that would risk if you were more rustic or
Exactly.
So, okay, yeah, that
Okay,
if you do, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I will give a very laughable example, okay? I'm not for the monarch, I'm a Canadian, but I am not for the monarchy. And all of you know that Canada is a constitutional monarchy, okay? But if it happens that I meet King Charles, I will be polite with him. I will call him Your Majesty, okay? But in my mind, I know that I'm not in favor of monarchy. But there's no need for me to make a tantrum, okay? Because if I want to bring down monarchy, I better create the political party for that rather than being impolite with King Charles.
That might be more productive. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, it's an excellent example. I want to come back to a lot of the points that you're making. So, but we have, or do you want to comment on anything else right now, Quan?
No, that's all. Thanks.
Well, I'm going to come back to a lot of what you said, but we have a lot of people online. I'm trying to see if I missed anybody that doesn't have their hand up. All right, everybody seems to have their hand up to type exclamation point. This combination of So with Kevin, James, and Allison, and then I want to come back to, and then we
the
should,
lady Alison take a turn. She's not speaking yet, right?
since
But
she hasn't
Alison,
spoken yet, and
yeah.
then, yeah, we still need to at least touch on 19.
Yeah, section 18 reminded me of an expression in Texas. You can't put lipstick on a pig. And, you know, the whole idea that you can dress somebody up, take them somewhere, but if they're, basically, if they're a redneck, they're still a redneck, no matter how dressed up they are. And it's kind of an expression that was used a lot in politics. I mean, Obama used it at one point. But I was just looking up the history of it because I got curious about it. It actually started in England. A doctor said that a hog in armor is still but a hog. But it just seems like it's a similar kind of idea. That's what I thought anyway.
No, I think that is an excellent analogy as well. So thank you for that. Next up, we have Kevin, I guess. I do want to come back. We'll come back to what you said, Allison.
Yeah, thank you a lot, Sunit. Over this time, I'm going to use 2 ways. This is that's we analyze. It's very practical. So, for example, 17 said, we should use a Dao. It's a metaphorical Dao. The door, road, big road, main street, highway. It makes sense. However, you think that like a man said, we also have other ways to go. Why small road is not better than a big road? And also you think about the time, space, and budget, and the environment. Is lots of variables over there. And as for 18, yeah, this big one, positive one. One idiom I'm not sure in English how to translate. 得意伤心. 得意 de means virtue, and plus 意 directly on the art. Basically, if you enjoy good picture, but your virtue is bad, it's not value as a 君子 or a big person, you know, you're very respectable person. So that's one way. Another way I think about why you see the one. That's mean you translation elegance. What's the definition for that? Different culture.
The different definition for what? I'm sorry.
Elegance, right? Like elegance based translation from our, sorry, I lost my word.
That's okay.
Yeah.
No, I interrupted you. Keep going.
So yeah, it's you basically the good words. Sometimes when we do those virtue things, we have judgment over there. We value something. For example, 子, we talk about this true self, or how about true nature? Where we come from? When we born, we don't have clothing, right? We don't have such a like a virtue on our head and knowledge. But we growing up, we build up those masks for ourselves. How about compared to our modern living to indigenous people? So it's a lot of things that we can think about. I got a quick comment on 19 was, yeah, about straightforward or crooked. That's based comparison. That's another similar to 17. It's a lot of thing I would say. If this idea is compared to Lao Tzu Dao, it's something especially Zi. If you remember, Jovi, uncovered block, that's the Lao Tzu very valued. Uncovered, this is nature. So wood, that's wood by have skin. We want to make furniture, we keep covered. We consider that's beauty. But real beauty maybe from nature. Uncovered also beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And if you look in the chat, you'll see what Aman translated for you, what was elegance. So which is actually kind of this, again, that's critical to this particular passage. I've seen it as being refined too, that word being translated, or that symbol being translated. So James, followed by Richard.
Okay, and this time I'm not muted. Wonderful. Okay, 17 and
that's
to
important.
me, yeah, it is. Yeah, 17 and 19 look somewhat similar to me, and they both kind of ring true in a strange way. The idea that there are people that don't go out by the front door, and this can be taken a couple different ways. I mean, I know people that are very well educated that's sort of like, well, they don't like necessarily reason everything straightforwardly. So the idea of this is doing the straightforward thing instead of do the wrong thing, and it's kind of like, why do people do that? In number 19, there's this other example of people being built to accomplish things by correct actions, and that's essentially how you survive. And when you do things badly a lot, and you're still alive, it's only by good fortune. It's not because you planned it necessarily, or maybe you did have a plan. I don't know. But Confucius is basically saying those people are fortunate. And then number 18, I really like, because it's kind of in the form of it's almost like a computer program here.
Mm-hmm.
If your authenticity is way up there, or and you're be yourself, and your education is like a little lacking, then you look a little rustic. Makes sense. And then but else then your true self is kind of like is not very well developed. You don't know where you are or who you are, but you're highly educated, and you're perfect for the job of clerk. You're perfect for the job of working in and I don't like the disparaging terms for this. This person who is like, doesn't know where he is or who he is, and doesn't stand for himself, but stands for the collective other, that person is kind of but knows how to say the right thing because he's overeducated, and that person is qualified for certain kinds of jobs, and they will do that type of thing. But then there's a final else clause in the computer program, and the final else clause is for everyone else when there's a balance of authenticity, self knowledge, and education, and those people are the Junjing. So I really appreciate the logic, the syllogism. It's just almost math. I mean, it's like mathematical logic. It's wonderful to sort of see it expressed in that way. For me, anyway.
No, it is very interesting to see. And I really liked your comments with 19. I think that was something that, while it's simple in nature, like it's pretty straightforward, that, if you're deceiving people, that inevitably you will be caught, or, that things will not work out for you. And if you don't, it's just random chance. I mean, I think that a lot of people actually essentially function like that. So, that they're, but you're not living virtuously. You have maybe a guilty conscience. But it is by chance that you don't get caught doing the thing that's wrong. And if you think about it in the terms of the times, that actually, had a lot of meaning. The fact that if you were acting, you were not necessarily acting virtuously or acting even honestly in your position of power, that yes, then it is something that if you didn't get caught, you were very fortunate and you're leaving your hand, leaving your fate up to randomness. So it's simple, but I think it's still profound. Richard, nice to hear from you.
Yeah, I just want to echo James's point, like his analogy of clause, because I do think that like what Confucius here is trying to establish is a social contract. Because if everybody like are being virtuous, then this is like good for everybody because we can be a like better society as a whole. But in like if there is one like black sheep, then the like he or she will be the like sole benefiting individual out of this whole thing, and everybody else will hurt. So in that sense, I think Confucius actually knows the answer to the question like 6.17. Like for this social contract to actually work, it needs the power to be enforced very well. Then it needs to come from those who are in power or in political class or in military power to actually ensure the enforcement of this kind of social contract. So I think this is kind of like a comment or to appeal to the emperors, to the rulers, to like hear me, to like hear my theory and actually implement this kind of theory, because like he himself has no political class to do that. So actually that relates to 6.16 and 6.18. I think in order for people, for sure, for this kind of like politicians to sell the social contract, you need either good like oratory skills or like writing skills, or you need to be good looking. Either way, you can sell this contract and to make people believe and to enforce it, to follow it. So I think, yeah, these skills are all the same. They serve the same purpose. And for 6.19, I think yeah, I think I originally thought like when I first read this, like this is such a weak point. How can one just attribute the punishment of breaching this social contract only to the karma system? And I actually didn't know that like Confucius was a believer of karma. So this was interesting to me. But like thinking about Chinese history, like several dynasties later, like those dynasties who are like actually like enforcing Confucianism like really like religiously, there were like all kinds of political witch hunts because like people are starting to say like, if you don't do this, then you are not obeying Confucius, and then you are a small man and you need to be burned to hell or something like that. So I like now like thinking back to what actually happened in the history, I do think that like maybe like this kind of like only attributing the punishment to karma system is actually good, because like it can be very easily exploited by some like bad rulers or some bad politicians. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, wonderful insights, Richard. I really appreciate it, and thank you for joining us this evening. I mean, I very much like the social contract and how you linked all three of these together, and the responsibilities of leaders in order to maintain that social contract. Because one of the things that there is an experiment that has been shown quite often was this idea of trust, public trust specifically, where there are literally a group of people that have each put in $10. 10 people put in $10, and it's multiplied by 5 times, so it's $500 at the end of the day, and everybody gets $50 back. and this is a social experiment. And that at one point somebody decides not to put their $10 in, and one person benefits from that because they didn't put their money in, but they still get the same amount out. What they showed right after that is that the equilibrium for when people had a trust with one another was very weak, because right away everybody stopped putting their money in. And what I'm just basically saying is that once that social contract is actually violated, that trust is actually violated, and people aren't acting responsibly in power, that it deteriorates very quickly. I don't know if that's the best example, but it's the best behavioral economic example that I could come up with on the fly, as far as showing that why virtuous behavior is actually so important, and that if one person just steps out of line, that you can actually, it was an attempt, if anything else, to explain, to articulate. Does anybody else have anything they wish to?
Brian wants to speak.
Oh, Brian, forgive me.
So I just wanted to go back to number 18, and I really liked and agreed with what, with all the different explanations. I just wanted to share a slightly different view on it, not a different understanding. And that would be in terms of an artist or someone who's attempting art, let's say drawing or portrait. The person in the first instance, who has the true self but no etiquette, he might be, let's say that the artist is given a portrait and asked to copy it. The first person who lacks the etiquette or education, the culture, is not able to copy it. The second one, who has the education, let's say that, but can't express it in the art, or excuse me, has the education but can't express his individuality in the copying, well, he'll just copy it and it'll look exactly the same. And then the last one, who has the balance of let's say etiquette or training, culture and individuality, he can copy that painting, but he can even improve upon it and give it its own personality. So that, let's say the first one might be a student or an apprentice, the second one could be a master, and the third would be a virtuoso. So that just occurred to me, and I wanted to share that.
No, I like that. I like that framework, actually. And that is a slightly different interpretation, but I like the way you set that up. Does anybody have any comments they wish to share based on what Brian just
I thought
shared?
that was I liked it. I liked it because it was kind of honest evaluation of some aesthetic views, some views on art.
I thought it was more nuanced.
Than Confucius?
Yeah. My opinion.
I don't know the Chinese that well, but I did like Jason's translation quite a lot. I think he was really onto something.
Aman?
Yeah, I unfortunately, Brian, don't have a response to your take. I did have some thoughts based on what Richard was saying, because I think couching this in the idea of a social contract is vitally important and significant to time and place, as has been mentioned before. This is the late spring and autumns period when the Zhou dynasty was in decline. You're right on the precipice of what they call the Warring States period. And if that strikes anyone in modern times as kind of terrifying and prescient, it was real terrifying for, you know, that period in time for the Chinese people, living in a world where their faith in these centuries old institutions was just disintegrating around their ears at a really rapid clip. It was kind of remarkable how quickly the whole edifice just came collapsing down. And what you were saying before, Joe, about the idea that that social contract is based on a trust that is easy to lose and hard to gain, is an idea that has been supported by many, you know, historians and others throughout history. I do think Confucius was touching on that in these three passages, this idea that, you know, you might escape the punishment of your actions in the short term, and that could be as a result of luck, as he points out in, you know, verse 19. But the consequences to everyone around you, the consequences to what it will do to your society, to your country, your culture, your kingdom, are inescapable and irrevocably bad. They will cause the downfall of your society. The amazing thing to me is that, you know, it's easy to be a naysayer and a doomsayer and see how the sky is falling around your ears. But Confucius had a real intrinsic belief in people's ability to turn this around if they could earn that trust back. And that was something that they were going to have to do through lots of hard work, by becoming junzi, by refining their authentic self and their culturated self, by, you know, respecting those institutions that deserve the respect that they had earned for centuries, and disregarding sort of the latest fad of an attempt to launch a new tradition or a new idea. There is a real bent towards traditionalism in Confucianism that poo-poos anything innovative. But his idea that people could do this from the ground up, that this could be a grassroots movement in some ways, was fairly revolutionary in and of itself, but couched in tradition to make it legitimate. It was how the Zhou ascended to the position of authority and power and esteem that they had so many centuries before when he admired them. And it's how we could do it again if we can just get back to these lessons we've forgotten.
That's beautifully put. I mean, it's interesting in studying a little bit more about Socrates recently, and I mentioned this a little bit. I'm in the middle of a course with this, but thinking about what leaders do you actually want in charge? And, you know, you start thinking about the characteristics of those individuals, and it's not, you know, it's important because of, you know, their position actually can undermine an entire society. So you want someone that has self-control, that that demonstrates the virtue of temperance, because if they don't, then the ramifications for that again, it can undermine the confidence of an entire society and this idea of the social contract, as we were talking about. So that this is one of the most important reasons as to why. Go ahead, please.
I just wanted to make one other point, because I was recently listening to something about this idea of trust as a absolutely seminal component of any society. It is not uniquely human. Even guppies, even fish form trust bonds with one another that when they are violated, cause them to decide, okay, I don't trust that fish anymore, and they'll eschew it. They'll run away from it. This is so baked into us as an animal that, and so is violating it. That's something else. It is as natural to put trust in another as it is to be disappointed and violated by another. We're unique as humans in putting our trust into abstract institutions that we expect to maintain that trust beyond the demonstration of its earning from any given individual. And when that starts to collapse, that is when we start to see this scramble to find solutions that are usually very after the fact.
Excellent. And I'm going to put a link in the chat to the example that I was trying to provide a little bit earlier. Let's go Quan and then James.
Yeah, I would like also to come back to the paragraph 19. And I would like to remind that Confucianism is truly a classical philosophy, okay? So what I mean that Confucianism is truly a classical philosophy, it means that it's a philosophy conveying the timeless values. And at the core of Confucianism, there is a metaphysical hypothesis.
Right.
And that metaphysical hypothesis is that as human beings, we are born with 4 seeds. Okay, those 4 seeds are the capacity to discriminate right from wrong, the capacity to feel pity or commiseration, the capacity to feel respect, and the capacity to feel shame. And that is a given just because you're born as a human being. Okay, and that's the metaphysical hypothesis. And from here, the basic utterance, declaration, statement, profession of faith of Confucianism is that from those 4 seeds, because you are going to the school of the scholars, you will learn how to transform the natural capacity for commiseration into humanity. And you will learn to transform the natural capacity to discriminate right from wrong to wisdom. And you will transform the natural capacity for respect into an inner sense of rituals, but also courage, okay? Because courage is not foolishness, okay? It might sound a bit strange that I put the inner sense of rituals with courage, but if you think that courage is not foolishness, it's perfectly normal to put courage with an inner sense of rituals, or if you want, of what is appropriate and clever and skillful to say, to do in a given situation, okay? To go back to the example given by Amon, okay? If you have an old comrade coming back, expressing too much your love for him could be perceived as inappropriate, as foolishness, if you want. And finally, the natural capacity for shame, well trained, well developed, will transform into justice, okay? Because you will act with righteous, with justice, if you have that inner capacity for shame, because you will see that if you do or say something, it might be unfair for the other, okay? But when you refine it at the maximum, you will be naturally just. You will be naturally upright in everything you say or you do. So at the paragraph 19, Confucius said, and once again, the famous mix in Confucianism between the very down to earth and the sublime. Confucius say, maybe because you're lucky, you wouldn't escape punishment, you would have a nice life, you would be successful in your profession or in your family. That's okay. I'm not wishing you harm. However, because you don't have the right inner attitude, you will miss the true way for a human being, which is precisely to transform those two original seeds into the four cardinal virtues. So even if you manage somehow, because you're extraordinarily lucky, you're extraordinarily endowed by nature with all sorts of talents, attributes, fine for you, but know that you missed the true adventure of a human life.
You know, one of the things, if I could follow up, if you don't mind, James, really quickly, because I think that you hit on one point that I happen to be very interested in and have been for a very long time, is this idea of shame and the importance of it. So how would you distinguish between shame and guilt? That's that's an important distinction that needs to be made, because you talked about something about how shame actually prevents you from actually acting. And I think of guilt, and I don't want to define it for you. I want to hear you say what you think it is, because these are very different concepts.
Yes.
And one is critical to the actual change of an individual versus,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So here we have to distinguish between the metaphysical shame and the more superficial social shame. Okay.
Right.
Because for the Confucianist school, once again, and that's why I said 2-3 weeks ago that there is a metaphysical dimension to Confucianism. The metaphysical shame is a natural feeling that you have inside you just because you are born as a human being. And when you say things or act in a manner that is not beautiful for a human being, okay, that's the aesthetic argumentation for morality. Okay, a true morality is when you have that inner sense of shame that I don't want to say that, I don't want to do that, because it's not worthy of the beauty of a human being. Okay, that's the metaphysical shame. Okay, and that's the Confucian shame. And you have the social shame, which exists in Asian societies too, of course. And that social shame is when someone, if your group of friends discover that you cheated at the exam, for example, so shame on you. Okay, so that social shame is the unpleasant feeling that you have when people discover that you have done something, okay, that you have been discovered in doing an ugly thing, okay, but that is not the metaphysical shame, because that social shame is not useful, okay, because most of the time that social shame would destroy the person, would not help that person to elevate himself to higher epistemological levels. What is important is truly the metaphysical shame, okay, or I prefer to say the aesthetic, spontaneous perception of oneself. Okay, I don't do that because that's ugly. It's not worthy of myself as a human being. And when you read shame in Confucian texts, it's the metaphysical shame. And guilt, it's more according to an ideal image that has been given to me. Okay, and guilt has more to do with personality. Okay, you shall not do this, you shall not do that, you should do this, you should do that. Okay, and if my behavior is not according to that ideal image, I would feel guilt.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Quan. I think that that's a very, very important point that you brought up. And these are some of these, you know, when we're talking about leaders and virtues and how virtue is actually cultivated, these are all very, very important things to discuss. James.
Yeah, I'm really haunted by number 17 still. And I don't subscribe to this the idea of shame as positive positive for society or positive for self-building.
Can I ask you one question about that, though?
Yeah,
Would you rather be someone shameless?
yeah, I'd like to be shameless, sure.
Okay.
What I mean, maybe I don't understand what you mean by shameless, but not having shame would be a great thing because that means that I'm just like I am. Everything I do is because of purpose. So by having a purpose, the fact is I always do what I intended to do. I have intentions that are in line with my actions, and I don't have shame. It's possible to have some shame, but it's easily to confuse that with guilt. I think guilt is very positive because guilt is what you sort of is something that you can carry with you. Guilt is like absolute. In other words, if you steal something, that's guilt. You feel guilt. If you
But that's about an
treat
act.
right.
That's about
Exactly.
an action, but
It's
it's
not
not
usually
about,
because of right about what? Yeah.
but that's
Sorry?
not about internally who you are. In other words, I can get
Well,
past, I feel guilty about stealing that, but you know what? I'm riding my new motorbike. I'll get past it. You know what? If I'm shameful, if it's shame, every time I get on that motorbike, I eventually turn it back in. That's the distinction that I'm trying to sort of draw out.
I see what you mean, but on the other hand, the shame is obviously something that would follow bad actions. And of course, if you did the bad actions with purpose, then you wouldn't probably experience shame. In other words, if I were a professional thief and all I did was steal bikes and I was good at staying out of jail and, not escalating my crimes and treating people otherwise ethically, I could avoid shame, perhaps. I'm not saying it would be good that I avoid shame, but I don't think that shame is automatic in the sense that it exists as a metaphysical force. You have to desire. You have to desire it. You have to desire shame if you have shame. Guilt, on the other hand, I think is very positive because as soon as you do something wrong, you have guilt. And if you're able to escape the guilt, that's good, because you won't, maybe you can keep riding the stolen bike. Like I think that's your example. But
Well,
on the other hand, sorry.
Okay. No, that in 19, that's kind of, yeah, but you're guilty.
19?
Maybe I'm thinking about in the sense that you're continually, you're gambling. Right.
Well, I think everyone gambles. I think this is something that I think everyone is subject to chance. So I don't think, I think 19 is correct that there's kind of like a right way to do things that will avoid bad results. And there's a wrong way, which will invite poor results. And he says, if you don't survive or you have the poor results, even though you do things the wrong way, then that's by luck. And I agree with that there is luck to life. And people will have good outcomes after with mediocre purposes or mediocre actions. That can happen. But that doesn't say anything about the subject of shame, the idea that they should feel shame because they didn't do something exactly right. I want to talk about number 17 because
Sure.
Number 17 has this idea of people doing things, basically the people doing things that where the right way to do things is obvious, but they do things the wrong way. And I don't see it strictly as a moral question, but that can enter into it. But the idea that there's a right way to do things, but there's certain people that instead of using the front door, they'll try to build a ladder so that they can get out a window or something like that. They'll try to figure out a way around doing things the way normal people would want to do things. And instead of like at the office, instead of always answering your emails and, you know, or using the putting trash in the waste paper basket, perhaps, people will put the trash in their drawers. And I've seen people do that in the office. So people, and a lot of this I think is training. People are trained sometimes to think the wrong way. They're trained to, if you have like a way to answer a question, they're trained to answer the question in a kind of religious way, or in a way that kind of like skirts the main issue. Like we're talking about Confucius here. So instead of talking about what Confucius is, or what Confucius was doing, or what his relation is to China and his time in China, or his times, you know, with the idea that it reflects on some kind of like a Western moral value or something like that, or the theory of the social contract, you know, from the 17th century. So there is kind of like a truth to number 17, in that people actually do take the wrong way out. But it's not because of always because of bad intentions. It's often because of being trained to find the wrong way, trained to find an alternative way to do things. And then there's a third level kind of people, I think, that are actually they're actually kind of raised on the street. In other words, they don't have really solid training, or they have, and once again, they could just have like a misanthropic teacher that kind of lets things pass, elevates bad to the level of the good, you know, and also rewards everyone fairly evenly. In other words, they learn that growing up, they learn that people who do bad things get rewarded either similarly or higher than people who do good things. And that can be a factor of living on the street and getting educated by criminals, or it could be a factor of just simply having teachers that don't really understand virtue and don't teach virtue, in the sense that Confucius is interested very much in virtue. He's interested in this whole span of virtues that constitute. He's always asking questions. What's good about this guy? What's good about the other guy? And it's always like different answers. There's a lot of different virtues, and different people for different purposes exemplify these different virtues. So that's one of the things that I really love about Confucius, not the fact that there's a single virtue and he tries to exemplify all of them, or I mean, he tries to exemplify that one, or that he tries to create a package that in unsurpassable virtue or anything like that. No, it's not what it's about. It's about that there is virtue, and it's various. It's a lot of different things that people can do to create good results, and
That's
he
interesting.
teaches
So
all of them.
you get the impression that it's it's various, meaning I take various when you say it is the idea that it depends on the circumstances, right? That's what you mean by various.
And who you are, yes,
And who-
the circumstances and who you are. These different
Good.
exemplars in the text all have different positives and negatives.
But you know, it's interesting. I just read it a little differently. I see it much more prescriptive.
Well, the idea that there's a sort of a model person that comes through. The idea
Right.
that there's a model person that understands the way. So if there's a model person, he understands the right way, and he's being really clear in number 17. What is the way? Well, the way is like there's a door, and people go out by the door. And if they don't go out by the door, they either have to be trained by the door, or they have to discover somehow that it doesn't pay to go out by the door, that there might be a better benefit for them if they are not the ones that if they don't follow the way. so it's so it's like in math we call it multivariant calculus. The idea that
Right.
math can get more and more complicated, and as it gets more complicated, it can solve more difficult problems in physics and in statistics and so forth. So you know, and things like sociology, that's where it's used also. So the idea that there's only like a single, I mean, it's not a single front door that everybody has to go out, right? But this is a metaphor. It's a metaphor for there's always a right way. There's always a way to apply yourself to a particular situation. And it's not a single set of values. It's not the social contract, the single social contract in China, because that was a war. They were in a war to decide what the social contract was going to be. So it's always something that has it's always something that's going to have you know, some play. There's always going to be values that are in play, regardless of whether you are educated to do things with purpose in the right way, or whether you've been educated in a way that you seem to take the wrong path for one reason or another. And there's a lot of people that do that. It's not, I mean, if you, maybe I'm being classist a little bit, but there are classes of people that do the thing the wrong way. There's also people that I know that I'm friends with that have some bad habits that way. They choose they choose wrong paths, not necessarily morally. I'm not speaking morally, but they choose to reason things out in kind of like negative ways. So so I think everything is nuanced. I think that this whole pathway of virtue is nuanced, and it's nuanced. That's why it's nuanced in Confucius's discussion. That's why he's always emphasizing different virtues at different times in the text, and it's always different people that are showing up in the discussion about those different virtues. That's why I love it, because it's so real. It's the realism that attracts me.
I appreciate you coming back each week and sharing your insights. I mean, this is that. There are things that I do like about Confucius, but there are things that I do worry about as well. I do think it can be too regimented at certain times. That's all, especially in book 3. You know, we're going over a lot of rituals.
You know, I have a feeling about that. I mean, I like the rituals. The reason I like it is because that's the way people lived in that time. So in other words, in addition to being poets and archers and hunters and farmers and all the great things that people in China were good at in that century, there's this idea that you would follow certain social rules, and that would be a kind of like a signal that would be virtuous, the virtue signaling of that time. But one thing I really love is that Confucius never gets that confused with superstition. He never says that you have to follow this rule or this ritual, or else the dead will come and haunt your dreams. Or he never says, right. So he never confuses that with superstition. It's just the rules of the age.
I prefer the Tao, but that's just me. So let's let Kevin and Quan comment.
Yes, thank you, Joe. Same to you, man. I like it though. I posted one is in Chinese modern history 100 years ago, 1919. They called 五四运动, May 4th movement. That's the time it's we may know last 200 years Chinese economy, the other powers just decrease dramatically. So the one way, what's the cost? One way people say complain about the rule, which is Taoism, Confucianism, or Confucius leading. So that's the one time. Also, you guys maybe know the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's also they don't like Confucius. However, majority of the time, include modern days now, you see Confucius school, right? So they practice lots. For me, I got it, thought even ourselves, in our mind, I would say Confucius makes sense if you modern practice. In a real practice, maybe like Jim mentioned, maybe we really need luck, need something like different ways. That's basically 617. I back to what? Who cannot go out without using door? Yes, I can go to door. Like basically from Qing dynasty, they kind of doing that. However, the foreign, this time is not just surrounding from the 8 nations. That's a long history. Maybe one time we can talk about that. I'll invade you, or so it's no way you can walk through. It's not decided by you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Quan.
Yes, I would like to come back to the notion of rituals precisely.
Oh, good.
Because let's not forget that Confucianism is a kind of summary of the cultural legacy of the Zhou royal house, or to be exact, the Qi royal house. Their family name is written J-I, so Qi royal house, the
Sure.
Zhou dynasty, or the
Yeah,
Zhou dynasty.
We were talking about them last week.
Exactly. And I would like to remind that Confucius was born in 551 BCE and he died 72 years later in 479 BCE. And that famous Zhou dynasty was created in 1045 BCE and ended in 256 BCE, but they truly ruled during the first 3 centuries between 1045 BCE to 770 BCE. Okay, that's their heydays, if you want. And Confucius was born in 551 BCE, so it's about 2 centuries after the end of their heydays. So, for Confucius wanted to revive the heydays of the Zhou dynasty. Okay, wanted to revive their glory. So that revival movement had a deeper dimension, okay? The ethics, the epistemology, the philosophical dimension, but also a outside revival, okay? In terms of clothing, in terms of behavior, in terms of right pronunciation of the words, in terms of rituals precisely, okay? Who were the social rhythmic tools for the nobility of the time, okay? Because the peasants did not have rituals according to Confucian understanding. The peasant had customs, okay? I don't remember where exactly you have that phrase, but somewhere in the Analects, it's written that the peasant have customs and habits, and the noble man have rituals. So that outer dimensions of the Zhou dynasty revival was quite important too, because I don't remember where exactly, but in the Analect, Confucius would say the gentleman would not wear that in summer, and he would not wear this in winter, and blah blah blah, and he would not eat that in that manner. It looks a little bit pedantic and the behavior of a prig for us precisely, but let's not forget that, and I come back again to that mix of the sublime and the very down-to-earth stuff in Confucianism. Okay, and the dimension rituals for the everyday life of the aristocracy of that time in China was precisely rituals. Okay, you would eat your supper with a certain kind of music. Okay, you would have your breakfast with another kind of music. If you have a grand banquet, it would be another kind of music. And when you are at the banquet with the king present, you would have to say certain poems. And when you have a banquet with your equals, you would have to say another set of poems. Okay, so those things were the markers of nobility for the people of that time, and was part of the Zhou dynasty revival for Confucius.
I was going to add, yeah, that was great. I think for me, on your comment, Joseph, the Tao Te Ching kind of reaches up to heaven in a way for me. You know, like in other words, the idea is that it uses nature as a kind of like a backdrop for understanding the human condition and the human action, and the metaphor reaches right up to the sublime, you know, which is different, you know, from the habits and the attitude of Confucius. So I understand your point, but it's like, for me, it's like reading two good books, or you know, any two good books. You don't have to be a anti-Tao Confucianist any more than you could be a Taoist Confucius hater. It's to me, a lot of the attitudes are not contradictory. They're just different.
They are different. I mean, they contradict at certain points, but no, I mean, you know, there are clear instances where Confucius is following the way. I mean, you know, in certain cases, I do think, I think it's in this chapter that Quan was just talking about. We get into a little bit about, at different points, what the capabilities of human beings are. And that I don't necessarily appreciate too much, even though there may be an honest assessment there, are the limitations of human beings. That's another part of Confucius that I think that, especially for that time period, you know, I think about some of the things that we do even now. I mean, or even at the turn of the century, where we labeled people along the lines of what they were capable of and not capable of doing, and what that meant. And you know, I kind of, you know, not to say that everybody's the same, but at the same time, sometimes labeling people at that, especially when at that particular moment in time, that must have been, that, you know, that could have been very dangerous. So,
well, it's part of the modern dialogue too. I mean, like I said before, there's no absence of classism when we speak. You know, when we speak of virtue and we can make it seem like there's an absence of classism. We just say, well, these virtues apply to everyone is following them, and isn't that great? But the idea is that people are more or less educated. People are educated in different countries, follow different rules according to where they're from and so forth, and what their religion is. So there's lots of what we have in the modern world. There's all this diversity which you didn't necessarily have in Confucius's time. But the idea was that you adapt to what the condition is. So in the modern world, we do talk about limitations. We talk about psychological limitations. We talk about limitations in philosophy. I don't know if you've ever read Immanuel Kant, but his whole thing is about the mind is limited. and there's only certain directions the mind can easily go in, and if it goes in the, it can't actually match. It can't do a perfect job of matching up sensations with ideas. It often gets things wrong if it doesn't use the right metaphysical approach. So and you can agree or disagree with all those ideas that he has, but I'm just saying, the whole trend of modern history is to kind of be extravagantly multi-leveled in your ideology, and this applies all the way down from politics to philosophy and religion, psychology, philosophy, religion. All of those disciplines have these talk about these limitations of the human being as they apply to those different sciences, and so, or arts, whatever you call them. So yeah. So I don't see anything strange about Confucius sort of limiting his outlook. Because it's
not odd.
time.
It's not odd, but I do, there's, no, I mean, I don't mean to single him out like, oh, he's the only one doing this. That's certainly not the case. I'm just wary of it.
But I would like to ask, is it possible to have social interaction without some kind of rituals, even if it's not very codified?
Oh, no, that's the beauty. That's kind of, yeah, I mean, that's the appreciation that I've gained for ritual out of Confucius. I mean, there are ones that are too stringent, don't get me wrong, and too prescriptive. Mourning your parents for 3 years seems, a bit extreme on a number of levels. And I think that even the hierarchical behaviors, that the expectations of how people should dress for certain funerals, and I think that is okay for that particular moment in time, but I see where that could be, I don't know. I guess he's expecting everybody to play their role and to live up to their role in society. I get that, but I also understand that can be problematic in and of itself as well. So, but you're right. No, we all need some degree of ritual, that otherwise you just have chaos, right?
Well, we'll encounter them whether we like them or not. Like here in the US, we have situations where if you don't go to football games, you're going to be in the out group, or if you or at least watch them on TV, you'll end up being in an out group, like because of school or work or something like that. So it is kind of like a universal that people are expected to participate in rituals. I had a heart-to-heart talk with a man from Germany about 30 years ago, and he said where he is from, this doesn't apply to all of Germany, because there's a lot of there's a lot of cities that are very cosmopolitan in Germany now, but where he is from, you couldn't miss church. And I've talked to Black people in the United States that say the same thing. You can't miss church because people will talk about you the day you miss church, and they'll be standing there on the street looking at you funny when you walk by.
And that's an element of conformity, and that's actually using shame in that particular instance as a stick to make people conform, which is actually shame, which is completely different than what we were talking.
That's the social shame as an instrument of control.
Exactly, which is very dangerous. which is very dangerous. But I put an article actually in the chat that you should look at, James. I think that it might change your mind a little bit, or at least
Which one? Top one?
uh,
Confucius and the world he created?
No, definitely not that. I'll put it in again.
These
I
are
should-
videos. Yeah.
Yeah, those are videos. Somebody asked for videos for me. But I mean, I'm enjoying this journey. I really am, because now that I'm getting the historical context down, and Quan, you have added so much, and it is such an honor to have you here. James, it's always an honor. Brian, but everybody, Kevin, it's an honor to have all of you. You know, Mike, and I know your name. It's iPhone 25. It's just 11 o'clock at night.
I don't.
You know her. She's I don't know. It's 11 o'clock.
Elena.
Elena, thank you. I was not leaving you out. But anyway, no. Quan, it's been really fantastic that you join in this, because now that I'm starting to get the context of Confucius, and I'm starting to see how they applied virtue and why they applied it, and how it differs from some Western approaches, but how it's similar as well to some of the Western approaches towards virtue ethics. They are different, and I think Amon captured that very well today. But there's virtue ethics and Stoicism that requires you, is very much a pro-social aspect to that. In fact, that's required as far as a way of attaining wisdom. So this idea of the community and your role in it, and that's part of your virtue, is that you're virtuous in acting in the community, and that you're not an individual. Kind of has some similarities to cosmopolitanism and Stoicism, and the way Amon explained it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I think a key term is equilibrium for Stoicism and cosmopolitanism. People have to deal with equilibria, and
Yes.
that the Stoic uses his virtues as a way of seeking equilibrium, not to gain advantages on others, but rather to be able to seek equilibria through virtue. And then for the cosmopolitanism, I refer you to existentialism. That's I think the last word in cosmopolitanism. If you see life as if you understand life as a kind of a challenge, continuing challenge, and not a single challenge, but kind of like a multifaceted challenge, and that there are ways to that are common. There are common kinds of call them virtues, common kinds of ways to think your way through the problems of everyday life. Then that are both ethical and require positive intended outcomes, then that's a way of approaching existentialism. From outside, we can see that, well, existentialists want to have good outcomes, and they intend to be ethical and in achieving those positive outcomes. So I think if you look at all these different if you look at all these different situations and problem sets that exist in history, I think that's one of the things we're getting, from reading Confucius. We see this problem set that we, especially as Westerners, we don't know this problem set.
Right.
We never experienced it, and we didn't know a thing about it in my case. And the only thing I had before this was the Tao Te Ching. So yeah, so the it is kind of a nice way to reacculturate ourselves to the universe of human civilization, as opposed to being self-complacent. Oh yeah, I'm an American,
Right,
and all
right.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And precisely, do you want to say something?
No, please.
Joyce?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Let's not forget that concerning the cosmopolitan attitude, at the time of Confucius, even if you have the high culture of the Zhou dynasty, which was recognized and acknowledged by everyone as the top culture, if you want,
Right.
China has been fragmented into, at least at the time of Confucius, between 70 and 100 principalities. Okay, so you have states about the size of 100,000 square kilometers, or even big states of 200,000 square kilometers. Okay, 2,000 square kilometers is about the size of a European country like Romania, for example. Okay, some state of the size of Switzerland, 40,000 square kilometers, and some states only 1 or 2 cities. Okay, let's say Hong Kong, for example, which is about 1,000 square kilometers. Okay, so you have a mix of very powerful states, of small states, and they have their own local customs. They have their own way to pronounce the words with their own local dialects, and so on. So the educated nobleman play a role of glue between those different principalities, because they all remember that they all come from the minor branches of the Zhou dynasty. Okay, but since the Zhou dynasty lost their glory in 770 BCE, the local principalities have much more autonomy. They were virtually independent. Okay, they were small countries. So that high culture of the Zhou dynasty, even if it was quite degenerate at the time, and that's why Confucius wanted to revive it, was the cosmopolitan tool of the time to create the universalism. Okay, that's why he was speaking of human nature, of human cardinal virtues, and so on, because those are the main and superior things that would put all the Chinese together in the sinosphere of that time.
That was interesting. Yeah, because I kept on thinking about today with the translation, and I really did think, was it 618 was the one that was I don't know. I mean, I look at so many, I'm off, but the use of nature in one translation I really liked, when Jason was pretty much talking about true self surpasses elegance. And I was thinking about true nature, in that, what is our true nature? How does actually Confucius view our true nature? Like, how does it differ than, say, well, I mean, I know it differs than Han Fei, right?
Yeah.
So what is Confucius's view on nature then?
Well, that's a big question. That's a big question. But if you want a bookish answer, it's easy. But the bookish answer is very simple. Okay, it's the Confucian Metaphysical Hypothesis. Okay, if you are a human being, just because you're born a human being, you naturally have the capacity for respect, for shame, to discriminate right from wrong,
Okay.
and to feel commiseration. That's the bookish answer. But if you want truly to feel that on a personal level, you have to walk the talk. Okay.
Are you naturally good?
Yes, you're naturally good because the 4 seeds are all good qualities. Okay, to discriminate right from wrong, to feel shame in the metaphysical sense of the word and not the social sense of the word, to have the capacity for respect, and to have the capacity to feel a commiseration for someone suffering. Okay, so those are good things, morally speaking. So the metaphysical hypothesis at the core of Confucianism, that human beings are born good and that goodness can be developed into the 4 cardinal virtues.
Okay. It can be cultivated. Okay.
And that's the bookish answer. But of course, you have to walk the talk.
Oh,
I was
yeah,
going to go, I mean, I don't know if I should speak up, but I was going to go towards authenticity. I was going to go towards, people know what makes them good. So, so it's the natural, this thing that he talks about in number, I guess it's in number 18, right?
Yeah, it
True
is
self.
18. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's knowing yourself, the true heart, the being in touch with what you stand for. And this is not while it's kind of a universal good, it's not exactly, it doesn't take exactly the same form in every person in every place.
Yeah, we could have spent a lot of time on 18. I mean, we did.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Yeah,
But
so it's
well,
very metaphysical.
Yeah, well, that's 18 is the metaphysical core of Confucianism. Okay, it's not the only place in the Analects that tackles the metaphysical core of Confucianism, but 6.18 is definitely one major place tackling the metaphysical core.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're talking about refined expressions and whatever your nature is, that essentially is that what is refined, like what are you being taught, what are you cultivating, right?
Yes.
And then what's your true nature?
Yeah.
So just in and of itself, it's very interesting. I mean, some of the stuff that I read on this, I didn't get through everything.
Yeah. But I would like to give an example and to make an opposition, okay? Because those 2 philosophies influence Chinese life in general. Confucianism gives 4 things as being the core metaphysical reality of a human being, okay? But Buddhism would give another answer, which is a bookish answer, but everyone is, of course, invited to walk the talk, okay? Because you, as in all metaphysical system, you have the theory and you have the practice.
Right,
when you read the theory, the bookish answer is given to you.
Right.
But it's not because you know intellectually the bookish answer that you wouldn't be that existentially speaking. In the case of Buddhism, the bookish answer is that you are pure consciousness. And if you go back to your original source, or if I use a Chinese expression, if you find your original face, which is pure consciousness, that is the true journey of a human life. Because when you go back to the source, you won't be, you don't worry about the behavior or the smaller things, because that ultimate pure consciousness will give you the appropriate answer for each specific situation. Okay, a little bit like when in Christianity, Jesus would say, love and do whatever you want after. Okay, so there is a bookish answer in all metaphysical system, and all metaphysical system will have a theoretical part and a practical part, which is the more nitty-gritty dimension, how you will walk the talk.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, not every philosophy is, practical in nature, but in this particular instance, it is. We have our theories, and then we have the rituals, right, which are actually the implementation of how those theories are playing out in the world, how they manifest themselves, right?
Yes.
So that's essentially what we're talking about. Yeah, no, I can totally see that. This is a practical philosophy.
Yeah, I would say that philosophy of ancient times, being in the West or the East, were always practical. Maybe in modern time, what I would call 19th and 20th century, you have the appearance of some philosophical systems which are more intellectual and maybe less developed on the practical aspect. But all philosophy of ancient times were necessarily anchored in existential life. Name me one without an existential anchor from ancient times.
But what about, I mean, yeah, okay, you're right. I was going to say maybe Buddhism, but no, Buddhism is based on poverty. Yeah, and
from ancient times.
Well, there's the Jewish religion, which is based on law.
Right.
There's the Zoroastrian, which is based on the Persian Empire, I guess. And then yeah, it's easy to see the systems all evolve because of the because of the praxis of the society. They evolve out of the daily kind of like interests, at least of, if not of the whole society, at least of the highest classes of the society. Like in ancient Egypt, my understanding that a lot of what occurred in Egyptian religion was because of the interests of the pharaohs, the interests of the highest classes, the priests and the pharaohs.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It was anchored in life.
Are you going to be doing anything with Jason, Quan?
Yes, not this year, but maybe at the beginning of next year, I would like to discuss the interpretative schools, the different interpretations of the Chun Chu, the Spring and Autumn, one of the 5 classics.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Nice.
Yes, because I would be able to talk about one of my favorite subjects, a mix of history and philosophy and epistemology.
Well, just so you know, this weekend, he's actually there's one, I don't know what time it is for you. It's this is Saturday at 11. It's called The New Spirituality in the Future, for the Future, with Yasuhiko Kimura, and he's actually one of our greatest thinkers that comes here.
Okay.
If you want to attend that. But on October 1st, that same day, and I am going to miss it, and I'm really upset about it actually, is that Jason's covering Journey to the West.
Yeah.
And a classical novel, not for children. So yeah.
It can be for children, but if you go deeper, it's not for children.
Yeah, I'm assuming he's gonna, I don't know how deep he can go. I started listening to the recording, the BBC recording that he linked to. But I'm thinking that will be a series at some point. I have to be away Friday night, unfortunately, and I just can't, or Saturday night, Friday night too. Yeah, so I'll just do a quick announcement. So just some upcoming.
Okay,
meetups
I
and some
have some shopping to do. I'm gonna leave
Okay.
now, but thank you.
All right, no problem. I'll just do some quick announcements. Tomorrow, language and consciousness and meaning, exploring Barfield's legacy, part 2. And then Thursday and Friday are going to be Bhagavad Gita. We're just doing a wrap up of that. That's a really interesting text. And then, yeah, after that, it's just some other stuff. Reading Frankenstein, and we're doing the Faust as well. So, but I've really enjoyed doing this. And again, I can't thank you enough for you taking your time, Quan.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
It's an honor. It's an honor to have you here. I mean, you've brought so much to the meetup as far as just the context and then just the richness of the philosophy itself. So, so thank you very, very much.
My
Very
pleasure.
much appreciate it.
And it
So-
will be with pleasure that we will see you again next Tuesday.
You know what? Thank you. I can't wait to see you. All right.
Ciao.
You
Bye-bye.
take care, my friend. Good night, everyone.